Welcome, Housewives of True Crime. Oh my gosh, you guys, Monday. It's either you either have, I know I've been saying this for a while, but like you either are fully getting your kids back to school this week or you did last week and now you're like, oh my gosh, I still have a ton of to do. And I can't wake up in the morning yet. Or you're like, yes, I get to listen to Housewives of True Crime now because I haven't all summer because my kids have been driving me mad. I think that's what it is. And so I'm going to ask you first to share me with a friend. That would be so awesome if you met a new friend at school or someone that you're like, hey, let's chat about this. I listen to this true crime podcast girl, and I think you would be BFFs with her too. That would be awesome. And if you do not want to listen to commercials, because a couple of you guys had said that before to me recently, I don't know, no, I don't think there should be any extra commercials, but maybe it sounds like there is. I don't know. But if you do not want commercials, there is a way to bypass them besides just speeding them up. But that is to go on to, if you listen on Apple, join the Clink Clink Club. You just subscribe and it's $5 a month and it's cheaper than buying a Americano at Starbucks. Trust me, they are way over $5 now. And so if you listen on Apple, that's the way. If you listen on Spotify, you can just do, I think it's just called bonus content, or you can go to patreon.com/housewives of true crime and you can get it all ad free. And if you don't mind the ads, then I love our advertisers too, because that's what keeps these lights on. So if you still want to hear me, I have to have ads, and I'm truly sorry, but I promise you that we did not put ads on our program until it actually made sense, and this it doesn't run by itself. So I have to have ads so I can get a little bit of money so I can pay for this podcast. So thank you for sticking with me and getting through that. Also, if you want to come and let's BFF together and have some fun, well, CrimeCon is right around the corner, September 5th weekend, and you can get a discount if you go to their website, crimecon.com, and put in Housewives. I am giving a discount and you can come and hang with me. I promise you will be able to. And if you can't make it in September, we'll come on a cruise with me. It's called crimewaveatsea.com/housewives. And the itinerary just came out. It looks so fun. I'm doing a live show there and it absolutely is going to be a blast. So if you can take a couple days, it's during the week. So that's the only bummer part about it. So you're going to have to take some time off work, or if you only work on the weekends, then you don't have to take off time, but that's going to be so fun. And I'd love, love, love to see you all there. Come hang out with me. Seriously, I need some friends. So that pretty much wraps up, what I wanted to talk about. I'm also wrapping up my 3 little cute kids and putting them in 3 little cute schools in 3 different cities and 2 different states. So I am absolutely going batshit crazy right now. My nerves are high and my life is in chaos, but I am going to get it together. So just keep good thoughts about me right now if you can. My husband's also working crazy because you remember, if you have remembered, he started that new business with Glenn Powell, that really hot actor, called Smash Kitchen. And it's going so great. But if you haven't tried it, it's at Walmart or Sprouts. It's the best condiments. It's the best hot honey ketchup you will ever have, or hot honey barbecue sauce or regular barbecue sauce. But I suggest you try the hot honey. It's super cheap and it's all organic. So get it, because your kids really, really need to get off of the high fructose corn syrup. I promise you, I'm not going to badger you, but any way you can, get less high fructose corn syrup in them is better. And all of Smash Kitchen's products does not have high fructose corn syrup, and it's all organic. So there's my plug for my husband. You're welcome. But it's true. It's seriously awesome. Okay, now what are we talking about today? I'm going to tell you it's a wild, wild case. All right, Beaumont, Texas is located in the southeast corner of the state near the border of Louisiana. It's a fair-sized college town with about 113,000 people living in the city, and it's home to Lamar University, and that adds another 14,000 people to the census, so that's a lot. It's known as the unofficial Cajun capital of Texas, and the food is something you will want to check out if you ever visit. It was settled by the French that migrated to Texas from Louisiana in the early 1800s, and they brought their food traditions with them. Thank you, and yes, please. The city became the center of attention in 1901 when they discovered oil there, and that put Beaumont on the map forever. Through the years, it has remained the key player in the petroleum industry, and living in Beaumont is super affordable, you guys. So work in oil, live in Beaumont. The median home price is about $240,000, although you guys, it is humid down there. So I found actually a super cute 1,500 square foot, 3-bedroom, 2-bath home with a 2-car garage for under $200,000. And then I also found this massive 11,000 square foot, 8-bedroom, 7-bathroom mansion on 2 acres for $1.4 million. And it's listed right now. So if you want to move to Beaumont, now is the time, whether you have $200,000 or less than $2 million. Well, Gregory Joseph Flanagan, he spent a lot of time in Beaumont. He went by Greg, as most Gregorys do. He was 55 years old. He lived out of a hotel room in Beaumont during the week and drove 2 hours back to his wife in Louisiana, Lafayette to be exact. And he was married to the lovely Susie. They actually look like such a cute couple. Every Monday morning, he would drive to Beaumont and live out the week in a suitcase. And on Fridays, he would go home and he and his wife would, do the weekend things. His brother Michael and him were joint owners in this oil land leasing business. And that's why Greg went to Beaumont. Greg stayed in the Cabana wing at the Elegante Hotel. His company, or he and his brother's company, paid for this room on the weekdays. Most nights, Greg would just hang out in his room, smoke his cigarettes, snack on candy, and watch TV. While he was away during the week, he and Susie would communicate via email and phone calls. Text wasn't really, I think it was like the A, B, C, D, E, E, like you had to push all the letters that many times at the time. So email was easier. And Greg, like me, would turn his bedroom ice cold at night while he was watching TV and sleeping. His air conditioning was always on super low. On the night of September 15th, 2010, a little after 7 o'clock, Greg was stretched out on the bed with his smokes in hand, an ashtray, a candy bar, and a root beer to watch Iron Man 2 that he rented on pay-per-view. He got an email from his wife saying that she had filed a tax extension, and he replied back, "You're doing good, babe," which is so cute. Like she was doing good. The next morning, Susie waited for Greg to call like he always did, but her phone never rang. She tried his cell, but he didn't answer that either. So she called his office. Coworkers said he didn't show up. 2 of his coworkers drove over to the hotel room and knocked on the door of his room. And he wasn't answering. He was staying in room 348. There was no answer, so they went to the hotel manager to open the door. Once they got inside, they found Greg lying face down on the floor. They immediately called 911. Police were dispatched along with an ambulance, but it was too late. Greg was dead, and rigor had already began to set in. He was still holding onto a cigarette in between his left hand. The cigarette had burned all the way down after he fell to the floor. There was a hand towel on the bed with a partially eaten candy bar, his BlackBerry phone, his ashtray, and another thing that they noticed was the room was really warm. It was so stuffy, which was also very weird because it was South Texas in September, and they knew that Greg always kept his room very cold. There was no outwardly signs of trauma on Greg's body. They couldn't see anything in the room that indicated that it had broken into, no signs of struggle between Greg and any possible assailant. His wallet was there. He had a stack of $100 bills, y'all, and it added up to more than $1,000. So it wasn't a robbery. And when police checked his, with the other hotel guests in the nearby rooms, no one had anything to say. They said they didn't see any strange people, hear any noises, nothing. When police talked to Susie and Greg's brother Michael, they both reported that Greg, being a smoking, candy-eating, soda-loving kind of guy, wasn't in the best of health. He didn't like going to the doctors and didn't take any medication, and he certainly wasn't going to the gym because he was a chain smoker for decades and had a persistent cough due to it. They said that Greg also wasn't good about watching what he ate or drank. So it seemed as if Greg's lifestyle was going to be the blame. He must have suffered some sort of medical emergency like a heart attack or stroke. Photos were taken of Greg's body and of the hotel room, and then his remains were transported to the medical examiner's office for an autopsy. When the medical examiner, Dr. Brown, started his examination, he thought for sure he was just going to determine that this was a medical issue like a heart attack. However, there was a small abrasion on Greg's face where he had hit the carpet of the hotel room, and the medical examiner noticed another outward injury. There was a half-inch laceration on Greg's scrotum. Yeah, on Greg's disco ball, okay? There was some swelling around it, and there was discoloration around the wound, and there was a bruise that had spread through his groin area and across his hip. So that obviously was very alarming. That seems to be bigger than just a little thing. When Dr. Brown opened Greg's chest to begin the internal exam, he saw a ton of blood and a massive amount of damage to his internal organs. 2 broken ribs, lacerations to his intestines, stomach, and liver. And finally, the medical examiner noticed a hole in the right side of Greg's heart. It appeared as if Greg had been beaten to death or suffered some sort of crushing injury. The doctor said that the wounds to his genital area was the cause from probably a kick with a hard shoe, like a steel-toed boot, and the injuries to his chest were the result of direct blows. He estimated that Greg bled out within 30 seconds. The medical examiner declared that the cause of death was blunt force trauma of the chest and abdomen, and he listed the manner of death as a homicide. There was no way that Greg suffered these injuries while he was alone in his room watching TV. The medical examiner told the lead detective, Scott Apple, that the injuries that Greg suffered were often seen in crash victims or someone who was crushed under something heavy. So it didn't make a lot of sense to detectives. The crime scene did not line up with these injuries that Greg's autopsy had revealed. No eye or ear witnesses, and there were no external injuries that indicated that he had been beaten or crushed. You couldn't see any bruises on his chest, but everything was destroyed from the inside. It's almost like it happened from the inside out. Just that small cut on his disco ball. There was also the question of why. If Greg was beaten to death but not robbed, it could have been basically you're thinking that somebody just hates the guy, but they're not going to take his money. But Greg didn't have any enemies. He was liked by everyone in his company. He didn't go to bars, pick fights. When he was in Beaumont, he was when he was in Beaumont, he didn't even hardly go to the bar. And when he was home, he hardly went to the bar. Like, he didn't have any enemies anywhere. He would work in the day, go back to his hotel room. He hardly ever interacted with any hotel guests. He was just described as this decent, honorable, smart, successful man, and people liked him. He was known to have a drink or two, but not in excess. His only vice was this chain smoking. He was not someone who would likely be killed for doing something wrong. So let's go back to the night that Greg was killed. Let's see. Greg had actually blown a circuit breaker at 7:30 that night, making a bag of microwave popcorn in his hotel room. It knocked the power out to the room next door, also room 349, and the rooms on the second floor below his. He reported it to the front desk, took full responsibility, saying hey, I turned on the microwave and boom, everything's gone. The maintenance worker came in to Greg's room, reset the circuit breaker. He said he did it. Gone. So police actually decided to look into this maintenance worker because he supposedly could have been the last person to see Greg alive. And turns out this maintenance worker did have a rap sheet that involves sexual offenses. So maybe the injury to Greg's scrotum was a result of an attack by this man for some reason with some tool like a screwdriver. But after an extensive look into this angle, the detectives eventually just gave up on that theory. It was nothing more than a speculation, and it didn't pan out to anything just because this maintenance guy is obviously a douche canoe. He wasn't being a douche canoe to Greg. So they looked into the people who were booked into the room next door to Greg, these guys that were in 349. They had also lost their power that night. Hotel records show that the room was booked to a group of electricians from Wisconsin that were in town for an extended contract to do some work for an oil company. They regularly got together after work and went out or met in each other's rooms to drink a couple beers. The two electricians registered to that room were Lance Mueller and Tim Steinmetz. Also in that room that night, I think, was Trent Pisano and possibly Scott Hamilton. Police interviewed them right after Greg was found, but they reported they did not have any interaction with Greg. They didn't even see or hear him, and they didn't think anything was out of the ordinary that night. The investigation really, you guys, was going nowhere. No new leads were popping up, so detectives decided to go back through the witness list. A little more than a week after Greg's death, police went back to the hotel to talk to the electricians again. Maybe they weren't as straightforward as they seemed to be at first. Maybe they got super drunk and got pissed because Greg had knocked the power out and decided to beat his ass. Detectives were purely speculating, but they were the only ones that were kind of close to Greg's room. But the three men didn't have any information for Detective Apple. They reported that they might have heard the guy next door cough or something when they went back to their room, but that's it. Detective Apple told them about the medical examiner's theory that Greg could have been crushed by something, but seemed really perplexed that anything like that happened since they didn't hear any loud noises. Lance Mueller added, "There's really nothing in the room heavy enough to crush anybody." They didn't even realize someone had died until they saw the body on the gurney in the elevator. One of them said that they didn't even realize it was a body at first. They just thought it was a really big caterer's cart carrying some food or cake or something. So months went by with no new leads. The family put up a $50,000 reward in November, but no one came forward. Greg's brother and business partner Michael hired a private detective who was a former FBI agent to help look in this case. Detective Apple met with this PI, went over the case file, but he wasn't really any help, and so they cut ties with him. Greg's widow, Susie, was getting real frustrated, as you can imagine you would be too, and she wanted to, put a lawsuit against this hotel because she's like, what the hell happened? A lawyer friend of hers told her about a private investigator named Ken Brennan. He's a former NYC police officer and a federal agent who was working in Florida as a private eye. So in February 2011, Susie reached out to him and he agreed to take the case. Ken flew to meet Susie in April and they went over the details of the investigation up to that point, which really was not a lot. One of the things he asked was if there was anything that just didn't sit right with her. I mean, besides her husband being dead and no one being able to say what the hell happened, Susie told him that she just really was surprised to learn that the room was so warm when Greg's coworkers went into it that morning. She knew that Greg liked to keep his room ice cold, like basically where this case is at the moment. So Brennan flew to Beaumont and linked up with Detective Apple. And I really do want to give Detective Apple some credit here because a lot of times active detectives don't want anyone else playing in their playpen, So according to this interview with 2020, these two got along great and they got to work right away. They began going back through the evidence from the hotel, including surveillance video and the maintenance records from when that circuit breaker popped. The maintenance worker had shut everything off before turning the breaker back on, including the air conditioning. Ken Brennan thought, okay, well, Greg was probably killed between 8:30 and 9:30 that night based on these records. He assumed that Greg hadn't noticed that the air conditioning was off yet between that time the breaker was reset and when he died, which is why it wasn't like he didn't turn it back down to make the room cold. Ken wasn't buying the theory that Greg had been beaten to death either. He still was holding his cigarette when he was found in the morning after his death. If he had been beaten up or even had something fall on him, he wouldn't have his cigarette in his hand. It was now 8 months into the investigation. Ken decided they needed to talk again to these electricians who had been staying in the hotel at the time of Greg's death. He picked up the phone and just started calling them. No one could recall any confrontation between Greg and any of the electricians from that group, but someone in that group did mention that they remembered hearing about a gun going off. Ken and Detective Apple returned to the hotel to look at things in room 438 again. And lo and behold, they found a little teeny spot on the wall that looked like it had been patched. There was a slight indentation that could be seen in the original crime scene photos also, but there was no reason to suspect a gun had been used back in September. Autopsy results also didn't indicate that a gunshot had killed Greg. The medical examiner had concluded that it was blunt force trauma. So room 349, where the electricians were staying, and 348, where Greg was staying, they were adjoining rooms, meaning that they had that door that connected in between them. So the indentation in the wall was along the door in Greg's room, like alongside that. And it looked like that indentation looked like it could have been caused by the door being swung open by a knob, hitting the wall, something like that. Except when they opened the door, the handle did not line up to where the indentation was. So the two investigators went into the adjoining room, 349, where the electricians from Wisconsin had been staying to see if there was a hole in the wall there. And there was a corresponding spot that looked like it had been patched up with some filler that was slightly pink. The detectives and the private eye pushed a dowel through the filler and into a hole to check the trajectory of the projectile that would have come from that electrician's room into Greg's room. So they pointed a laser pointer through it. The angle showed that the bullet would have passed through the wall from 349 into 348 and across from the foot of the bed to the headboard, right where Greg was lounging while watching TV, smoking his cigarette, eating his candy bar on the night he was killed. So they took their findings to the medical examiner, Dr. Brown, who at first was like, no way, that's not what happened. Greg had not been shot. He was like, there is no way. But the PI was like, I think Greg was shot in the groin. Ken Brennan pressed him to relook at everything. They wouldn't be able to exhume, unfortunately, Greg's body because it had been cremated, and any bullet fragments wouldn't have, they would have been destroyed in the cremation. So that was a big bummer. But they did have photos from the autopsy that they went through each one by one, and Ken said that Greg's internal injuries looked a lot like that of a track from a bullet. The medical examiner argued that the injuries could be the result of only being beaten, but then they looked at the photos of the hole in Greg's heart. Dr. Brown explained that when someone is hit or kicked in the chest at the right atrium, often does burst. But Ken persisted it was a bullet hole. He was certain he would be the first to admit that he wasn't a medical examiner, but he was a seasoned investigator who had seen plenty of bodies from homicides. And eventually, Dr. Brown agreed to his conclusion. A bullet had entered Greg's body through his scrotum, his disco ball, you guys, can you even imagine, and traveled into his torso where it left a hole in his heart. It's so sad, this man. I can't even believe this happened, you guys. In June 2011, Detective Apple and PI Brennan traveled to Wisconsin to interview the three men who had been in room 349 in September of 2010. And the first person they interviewed was Tim Steinmetz. He stuck to his story that nothing weird transpired that night. Detective Apple wrote everything out in a statement and gave it to him. He said, look this over. Tim noticed a few things that he wanted changed, he wasn't an apprentice, he was a journeyman. So Detective Apple made those edits, and then Tim initialed the changes, and after he was satisfied with the statement that everything was correct, he signed it as a sworn statement attesting to his original story. A local police officer who was also a notary came in to notarize the statement, and before the ink was even dry, Detective Apple and Ken Brennan hit Tim with the facts. He had just made a false statement, and they knew it. He just got himself into very hot water, and it could cost him very dearly unless he started loosening those lips. He could lose his livelihood and ultimately his family. So they encouraged Tim to come clean about what really happened that night. And according to him, it was all an accident. The three coworkers, he, Lance Mueller, and Trent Pisano, had gotten off work and went back to the hotel with a bunch of beer, and they just kind of chilled in room 349. As the drinking progressed, they somehow brought up that Lance had a gun in his truck. Trent went down to get it along with some whiskey. He went to the truck, got the bottle along with Lance's 9mm semi-automatic handgun, and brought them both back up to the room. Tim went on to tell them how Lance loaded the gun, and when he was messing around with it, he pointed it at him, causing Tim to fling himself onto the floor, like he actually thought that he was going to get hit. The two investigators talked to Trent Pisano next, and he corroborated Tim's story, but added that he had nearly become a victim himself because when Lance pulled the trigger, the bullet whizzed past his torso. They saw that it hit the wall next to the door between room 349 and 348. The bullet had been fired at the right angle at the right time to hit Greg Flanagan as he sat stretched out on the bed watching Iron Man. Right after the gun went off, Lance Mueller packed it up, took it back down to his vehicle, which hotel surveillance video did capture Trent bringing a bag with the gun inside and Lance leaving with it and coming back empty-handed, which I think that I would have thought something of that with the timeline in the beginning, but that's me. Trent was so pissed that he left the room and went back to his room. And then after that, Lance and Tim went back down to the bar and got to their room about midnight. They both actually claimed that they heard someone cough in Greg's room, but didn't check on him because, I mean, they didn't even know him. And neither Ken Brennan or Detective Apple believed that Greg could have still been alive at midnight when they got there. So that didn't really line up. But you remember, both of these, or all of these men, are kind of staying at this hotel for a long amount of time. So maybe that was just another night. Who knows? Also, these guys were really drunk. Back in Wisconsin, Trent called Lance and said, hey, the gig's up. They got us. And he should turn himself in. And Lance did. He was flown back to Beaumont in October of 2012 to face a judge. He pleaded no contest to manslaughter and offered an apology. The judge had the option to sentence him to up to 20 years in prison. And if at the time that this happened, he would have come forward and said the gun went off accidentally, it would have been much easier for this guy, because under Texas law, he may not have received charges at all. Accidental gun discharges aren't all that uncommon, and judges and juries tend to understand them. But Mueller, unfortunately, decided to try to lay low and hope that no one figured it out. He took some toothpaste and patched up that wall. He took the gun down to his truck and later actually stashed it with a buddy for a few days while the police were like all over the hotel. Mueller even gave the gun to his lawyer at one point for safekeeping before he went back to Wisconsin. Susie Flanagan was given the opportunity to provide a witness impact statement, and she spoke directly to Lance Mueller. And this is what she said. I have waited over 2 years to look you in the face, eye to eye, and simply have the chance to speak directly to you. You would have never come forward with the truth. You murdered him. No, you didn't intentionally seek him out to murder him, but you murdered him. With every lie you told, with every selfish, intentional deception, with every cover-up over and over again. You saw his body taken out of the room in a body bag the next day. You knew you killed him. He meant nothing to you. That is hard to hear, I think, because that is true. That did happen. And ultimately, Lance Mueller did receive a 10-year prison sentence for this tragedy. The other two men, Trent Pisano and Tim Steinmetz, were not charged criminally, but were named in a suit filed by Susie against the hotel and their security company. I wasn't actually able to find any outcome on that lawsuit. I am sure they settled that. Lance is out of prison now. I think he served probably about 5 years, maybe 6 in prison. But he is out. And obviously I do not think he meant to kill Greg by any means. And he probably just didn't know what the hell to do. I think it is a pure tragedy all around. Greg Flanagan, just a little bit about him. He was born on December 26, 1954 in Lafayette, Louisiana. He married his beautiful wife, Susie, when they were young. Before splitting up, you guys, they got They got divorced and then they reconnected years later after Susie called him. Vanity Fair reported that Greg told Susie, "I've been waiting for you to call," and they remarried again in 1995, and they were devoted to each other for the next 15 years. Greg was an avid reader and loved to travel the world with Susie and his family. He was said to be patient and someone who loved those in his circle unconditionally, which included stray animals that he came across. He was a true disco ball. The couple ran a bed and breakfast inn in Lafayette, where guests remembered him as a welcoming and total gentleman of a man. Greg loved nature and was said to appreciate beauty of the sky, whether it was sunrise, sunset, or just blanketing of stars. He loved water, the woods, fishing, hunting, and it was evident in his obituary of all of this because there were 2 foundations named, which I love. One was Save Our Wetlands, and the other is called Wildcat Foundation of Louisiana. So that is the crazy case of Greg Flanagan. All right, that wraps that episode up. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you want more, find me on Patreon, or if you want ad-free, that's where I am. I hope to see you soon in person. If you come to either of those events that I will be at, that will be awesome and fun. If you have any suggestions of cases, please tell me and I will be sure to do that. And if you want to get some of my beauty line, if you watch on YouTube, it's all up here. I'm telling you, actually, look at my hair I just got it cut, but it's actually like already growing. You can already see the grow out a little bit, but that's because I've been consistently using the scalp serum. It's so great. But all of the products are great. They're all organic. You guys, me and my family are very into, and I'm not like, I don't think you have to live your life like crazy, but as much as we can, we try to be as organic as possible and try to get things as healthy as possible for a good price. You know, I don't think it's imperative that you spend a ton of money on things, but it's great when you can find things that are healthier for you at a decent price. And so we try to do that as best as we can. So I hope you support us at 5 Crimes. That's FIVE crimes.com, and get your Smash Kitchen, you guys. If you shop at Walmart, you can find it. If you do Walmart delivery, that's what I do. Or if you shop at Sprouts, but soon it's going to be at HEB and hopefully at Kroger, Target, everywhere. And if you go ask them if they don't have it at your local shop, then they might decide to reach out to us. So that'd be cool too. I think that's it. So have a wonderful week. Hope you all are doing great, and clink clink.